There are a lot of extremes in the Spanish economy. Initially, they were a focal point of the Eurozone Crisis, then a major driver of growth, and finally, in 2020, the recipient of the worst economic impact of any advanced economy. Confusion abounds on the nature of Spain's economic woes. It often ran budget surpluses in the years leading up to the Great Recession. A major housing bubble, however, was waiting in the wings. What's the deal? How did Spain go from a money surplus into having a manageable level of debt to eventually a blow-up of one that threatened to overwhelm its economy? What effect did the pandemic have on Spain? And has the Spanish economy ever really recovered since then? Hey folks, welcome back to Darkness Unraveled. In this video, we are going to find out if Spain will soon collapse under its debt. Let's dive in. First and foremost, we need to understand the crisis in Spain. For almost a decade, the Spanish economy has been a major contributor to development in the Eurozone, with quarterly GDP growth rates that have consistently topped the average since 1995. This led to the country having a lot more extra money than needed. This money was then being directed into massive wastes and unnecessary purchases. You can say that Spain actually pushed their issues down the road and let future generations deal with the consequences, leaving the wealthy era behind. And then on top of this, the Spanish real estate boom happened. The burst of the Spanish housing bubble, which had been building for a decade, has coincided with global financial market turmoil, increasing concerns about a more severe and immediate economic slump than had been anticipated. So what has actually happened? 2007, the key driver of the Spanish economy for the past 10 years, collapsed. There was an overall decrease of 11% in residential building licenses in the property sector. In the fourth quarter alone, the number of permits collapsed by an alarming 29%. Even more worrying is that since then, the warning signs have expanded to other parts of the economy as well. The first quarter of 2008. The industrial sector is also feeling the effects. This quarter was the worst for consumer confidence and retail sales after adjusting for inflation in almost a decade. Eurostat reports that the annual rate of increase in manufacturing orders has slowed significantly since the beginning of 2008, and a study of European business sentiment found that optimism in the services sector hit a record low in March. But then it got better. This recession went on for a couple of years, and after that, the Spanish economy grew at a higher rate. This fast rate of growth has been made possible by a number of things. First, there was cyclical momentum. When the Spanish economy came out of the recession, many areas had a lot of room to grow. So when the economic outlook got better, the simple fact that things were getting back to where they were before the financial crisis was a big boost to growth. Additionally, some of the reforms that the Spanish economy did in the work field and in the financial sector, among other places, also helped the cyclical momentum. Second, the Spanish economy got a boost from a number of short-term factors that helped the recovery. Among these factors are the big drop in oil prices at the end of 2014, the drop in interest rates due to the ECB's policy of expansionary monetary policy, and the recovery of the world economy, which helped the Spanish exports and tourism industry. But in 2017, these support factors, which are also called tailwinds, started to weaken. Some of them even changed direction and became headwinds, like the price of oil, which has been slowly going up since mid-2017. Furthermore, the international situation has gotten a little worse in recent months. The normalization of U.S. monetary policy has started to affect the markets, and the growing trade tensions between the U.S. and China have made it harder for people around the world to be confident. The most recent data shows that the Spanish rate of economic growth has slowed down compared to the past few years, even though it is still high. So, now that we know this, what can we expect? To begin, we anticipate that domestic demand will continue to serve as the primary engine of expansion for the economy. This forecast is predicated primarily on two different factors. To begin, it is founded on the optimistic trend that has been observed in the labor market, which continues to exhibit a high rate of job growth. Although it is reasonable to anticipate that the job creation rate will slow down alongside the expansion of economic activity, they are still optimistic due to the high degree of slack that still exists in the labor market, suggesting that the economy will continue to generate employment at a rate slightly higher than 2%. In addition to the positive trend in employment, there has been an incipient recovery in wages. In the meantime, demand from the outside world will hold steady at a moderate level. We anticipate that exports will partially recover after a period of stagnant growth. Effects of the pandemic. The economic effects of the pandemic were very different in each country, depending on how bad it was, how their economies were set up in terms of the size and number of businesses, and what steps had been taken to fix the problem. Spain was one of the countries that was hurting the most because it relied so much on tourism and other industries that were hit hard by the crisis. It also had a lot of small businesses that didn't have much money saved up, and its finances were already weak, which made it hard for them to respond to the crisis. As soon as the pandemic hit, the data that had already been released showed a drop in production and employment that was very unevenly spread across sectors and territories. Spain went into the COVID crisis with little fiscal and budgetary room to move, which was an important extra problem. At the end of 2019, the government's debt was 95% of GDP, the government deficit was 2.8% of GDP, and the country's structural deficit was almost 4% of GDP. So they were going into a new crisis without having finished what they needed to do to get out of the last one. In those circumstances, COVID's damage to public finances put them in a tough spot with a very high need for money. Because of how bad things were to start with, there wasn't much they could do to fight the pandemic and lessen its economic and social effects. So does Spain need to worry? See, Spain's economy will feel the effects of all these stressors. Because of the global financial sector crisis, credit has become more difficult to get by, which is quite worrying for an economy that is showing signs of undue debt. It's more likely that other parts of the Spanish economy and the international economy will cause turmoil rather than the domestic financial industry. Although mortgages serve as collateral for Spanish-covered bonds, the banks themselves remain ultimately liable for the bonds' repayment. What needs to happen so this bankruptcy will not take place? Spain needs to take some strict action by improving its present situation. The country needs to make their budget more stable. Measures need to be set up for meeting government deficit goals. And when taxes need to be raised, the ones that cause the least amount of distortion should be raised. In particular, there could be less use of preferential VAT rates. VAT exemptions could be taken away, and taxes on things like pollution could go up. The rules for how regional governments spend their money should also be changed. Secondly, they need to restructure how savings banks are run by reducing the role that regional and local governments play. Thirdly, they need to push further on reforms of the collective bargaining institutions so that wage indexing clauses are thrown out, once and for all, by social partners. And the most important thing is to speed up the growth of productivity. Product market reform needs to go further by making retail trade and professional services more competitive. So viewers, these are some ways by which Spain can rescue itself from bankruptcy, and we hope the country can soon save its people from this economic crisis. And that brings us to the end of the video. Feel free to let us know what you think about this video. And if you like this video, then please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more amazing content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.